Hi, thank you for joining me for the Domus Masterclass. I'm Jules Archer, Domus's showroom sales manager, and in the short time we have, I'd like to take you through some of the ranges we offer and provide insights into the key design decisions you'll need to make when choosing flooring for your home, and how the team here at Domus can support you with your project from both a technical and design perspective. We've been a leading supplier of hard flooring in the UK for over 55 years, specialising in the supply of ceramic and porcelain tiles, and more recently wood flooring, laminate and LVT, and have more than 200 ranges in our collection. With so many options to choose from, we're confident we'll have a product that will fit your requirements. You can visit our stand to see a snapshot of the many ranges on offer, from pattern tiles, 3D feature tiles, wood flooring, and hundreds of stone, marble, concrete and terrazzo effect porcelain. You can also talk to us live about your project or reach us via our website. This masterclass is focused on house building and home renovation, so I'll be covering bathrooms, kitchens and external areas with info along the way on some of the common pitfalls and things to think about before you select the materials to use. And as it's the materials themselves that are going to form the framework for this presentation, I'd like to start by talking about the main groups of materials on offer and their pros and cons. Probably the best place to start would be natural materials and how they differ from some of their man-made alternatives. And by natural materials, I'm mainly talking about natural stone, so that's marble, limestone, travertine, granite, for example, but also wood and terracotta and ceramic, so that's clay-based, fired clay-based materials. And finally, cement and concrete. Now, I realise cement and concrete aren't technically purely natural materials, but they're so similar in so many ways to some of the other natural materials I've just mentioned in terms of how they behave, how they need to be treated and maintained over time, that I've included them in this category as well. Now, there's one thing that all these materials have in common, some common characteristics that you need to be aware of. First of all, there's an inherent uniqueness in the material. No two pieces are ever the same. There'll be slight shade differences, slight differences in texture and pattern on the surface. And this character can be beautiful and charming and can be something that can give a space a really lovely feeling of warmth and charm. These materials are all relatively soft and porous though, so they do need to be treated in one way or another, whether it's a sealant for a natural stone or a terracotta product, or a lacquer or varnish or some kind of oil treatment for wood. And equally with cement and concrete, impregnators are often used just to seal the surface and to stop them staining quite as much. But they are all relatively soft as well, so they can scratch and wear and weather over time, and may require some sealing and careful maintenance. Now, this staining and scratching and wearing and weathering that you'll see with natural stone and that you'll see with wood, depending on your perspective, you could say it either enhances the material or you could say that it damages the material. There are some beautiful examples of extremely old stone floors, for example, or old reclaimed wooden floors, which have got a huge amount of character to them. Extremely beautiful, but we also work with architects, designers and private clients who, when they fix a floor, they want it to look exactly the same through the lifetime of the floor. And if that's you, then you may want to think about using a different material. Maybe something a bit more hard wearing, something that doesn't need the same level of care and maintenance that, for example, a natural stone floor might need or a wooden floor might need. And the one conversation we're having, I guess, day in, day out with our clients in the showrooms is this idea of character versus practicality. So on the one hand, you have natural materials, the ones I've just mentioned, which are extremely full of character. Natural stone may include fossils and fissures and cracks, and wood floors may have shakes and knots and beautiful detailing and a huge amount of beauty and character, but they may not be the most practical solution for your space. For example, if you've got a large kitchen with bifold doors going out into the back garden, you've got 3 kids and a couple of dogs, then a really soft, chalky limestone might not be the best option to have in your kitchen. It's going to need a lot of maintenance, and I can assure you it's not going to look the same the day after it's fixed as it did the day it was fixed. So you might want to think again about using something that's slightly more hard-wearing, a porcelain alternative, for example. Equally, wood flooring can wear and weather and scratch and stain over time, but in my view, this is a beautiful and charming part of the aging process. But again, if you're in an environment where there's a lot of water, for example, or you wanted to use something outside where you wouldn't be able to use real wood unless it's been really, really well treated, and even then it may kind of fade and weather over time, you might want to think about using a porcelain alternative. And I'm just going to talk about porcelain for a couple of minutes because there's a few things that porcelain can do in terms of outperforming natural materials that make it a really, really good option when you're looking for something that has more practicality than character. Although having said that, the porcelain manufacturers today are engineering a huge amount of character into many of the materials they make. With new digital inkjet technology, for example, it's possible to create tiles which look extremely faithful to the original material they're trying to replicate, whether it be a white marble or timber or limestone or any of the natural materials that are out there. In porcelain, you can create something extremely faithful to the original with maybe not quite as much character, but certainly as much beauty, and also something that is almost infinitely more practical. And I'll tell you why that is. Porcelain is made of a few key ingredients. It's clay, water, quartz and feldspar. And these are pressed together and fired at very, very high temperatures, up to 1400 degrees. When the material gets to this temperature, all the air is expelled from it, so it becomes completely non-porous. And it also becomes extremely hard. Porcelain is one of the hardest building materials there is. In terms of its compressional strength, it's harder than concrete. It's very, very hard wearing when it's fixed solidly to a floor. And as I said, it's completely non-porous. This also means, incidentally, that it's frost-proof. So material tends to crack outdoors. For example, terracotta would crack outdoors when it absorbs water and the water freezes and it expands and causes the tile to crack. But with porcelain, as it's non-porous, it won't stain. It's not possible for it to absorb anything into the surface of the material, and it also won't crack when it's frosty outside. It's also a very, very reliable production process. And this is interesting because what manufacturers of porcelain tend to do these days is they're deliberately engineering some of the variation that you get in natural materials that I was talking about earlier. They're engineering this variation into porcelain. And as I said, they're using inkjet technology, which means that they can replicate in very, very keen detail some of the characteristics you'll see in a natural material, but whilst being able to control the production process so that you're getting an even number of differentiators between the tiles, whether that be a kind of a fossil signature or some kind of mineral in the surface of the tile, so that they know exactly what they're going to produce, and equally you know exactly what you're going to get when you take the delivery of tiles. No surprises in there as you may get with natural stone or with some of the other natural materials I've been talking about. So porcelain, very, very hard wearing. As it's so hard wearing, so durable and so robust, it's very, very hard to scratch it. It's almost scratch proof. That's one of the reasons, incidentally, that diamond-edged wet saws and diamond drill bits are often used or almost exclusively used when it comes to cutting porcelain tiles. They're very, very robust, and if they're fixed properly to the floor with no voids underneath and no air gaps, and there's no spring or movement in the subfloor, there's no reason why a porcelain floor couldn't last for the lifetime of the building. So it's a very, very good material to use in all sorts of situations. And as I said, I'd just like to bring you back to this idea of character versus practicality. This is the balance. This is what we're weighing up all the time in the showrooms when we're talking to our clients. Character, wood, natural stone, terracotta, and concrete and cement and caustic products. And on the other hand, practicality. Porcelain tiles being so much more practical than some of the natural alternatives. Although it's worth mentioning that they're not exactly lacking in character these days either. And if you have a look at our website and some of our lookbooks on our stand, you'll see some of these ranges that that demonstrate this really, really well. Once you've weighed up all the material options and thought about character versus practicality, you've chosen the colour of the tile and any pattern or design in the surface, the next consideration would probably be the finish of the tile. There's so many different options available now, but the main categories are polished, so a glossy surface, a matte or natural surface, or some kind of structured or riven surface, something which provides a really good slip resistance. And again, this is about weighing up the different options, the space it's going to be used in, and how much slip resistance the tile might actually need. So I'll give you a really good example, would be a bathroom floor. Now, a very structured tile with a rough surface gives you a really, really good slip resistance, but it can be slightly harder to clean. You can imagine trying to drag a mop over a very rough surface, almost like a sandpapery surface. It can be really hard to keep clean. So we supply a whole load of different ranges which have different finish options. So for example, if you had a grey bathroom floor, you could use a matte finish on the floor, which is perfectly safe to stand on. And when you go into the shower area, if you're tiling the shower floor, you might want to switch to something like a bush hammered or a riven or a structured surface, which gives you a much better slip resistance. Equally, in a kitchen, you don't need so much slip resistance, so a natural tile would be perfectly suitable and really easy to clean. But if you wanted to run the design scheme from your kitchen into an outdoor area so that the whole area read as one continuous surface, you could also switch from a matte finish on the kitchen floor and switch it to a structured finish outside, which will read the same visually if you choose the same colour tile, but it will also provide the right level of slip resistance to make it safe to use outside. Okay, so you've chosen your material, natural or man-made. You've chosen the colour, any pattern, and the finish. And the next thing to think about is going to be scale. One of the most common misconceptions when it comes to choosing a flooring material, or any wall tiling, for example, is that a small space needs a similarly small scale material to visually work with the space. We tend to advise the opposite. So, for example, if there's a specific design decision that's being made which requires small tiles, or there's a tile shape that you're using which is on a smaller scale, then that's one thing. But if you're trying to create a sense of space, then certainly the best way of doing this is to go big, large scale, and go big with the tiles or the wooden planks or whatever material it is you're using. So, for example, if you've got a small shower room, we can supply tiles that are 2 metres by 1 metre, for example, and your shower could literally include just 3 tiles, one on each wall. And what that does is that helps to remove the visual clutter that you get with lots and lots of grout joints. Now, as I said, there might be a reason why you'd like there to be lots of grout joints. It can often add texture to a space where it's quite hard to get texture into spaces like bathrooms. But also, if you want to create something that feels very spacious and feels much brighter and lighter and less cluttered and busy, then it's definitely worth thinking about going big in terms of the format of the tiles or the wood flooring you're using. The last area I'd like to cover, and this applies specifically to tiling, is grout and grout colours. Now, this is kind of one of those subjects that quite often doesn't get tackled at the start of the project, and it's left till the end of the project to make the decision on what grout colour to use or how to grout the tiles. And unfortunately, what that quite often means is it's a rush decision, and it can really, really affect the design of the tile scheme overall. And it's such a shame to see some beautifully installed tiles with the wrong choice of grout. It can make a real difference. So think about the grout colour you're going to use right at the start of the project and how it's going to work visually with the tiles. So, for example, if you're using a small format tile and it's a particular shape or an interesting format, you may want to choose a contrasting grout that really picks out the shape of the tile so that you can highlight how interesting and unusual the shape is. It could be a chevron, it could be a hexagon, it could be a circle. And you might want to choose something that contrasts in order to pick out that individual shape. On the other hand, you may have a large kitchen dining area where you want a feeling of space and you want the flooring to look continuous. You might have used large format tiles, and as much as possible you want the grout colour to totally disappear. There are literally hundreds of grout colours out there, and you can choose one fairly easily that will almost identically match the colour of your tile, and that will give a really minimal, clean and continuous look to the floor, almost like it's a poured concrete floor in some instances where you really can hardly see the grout joint at all. Many tiles these days, certainly flooring tiles, have what's called a rectified edge, and what that means is the tiles are square cut, so you can put them very close together, 2 or 3 millimetres apart. And when using a grout colour the same colour as the tile with a very minimal grout joint, you can almost make that grout disappear. It can look really, really impressive to have a continuous, very clean, very minimal floor in a large or a small space. So there you have it. Those are some of the key design and technical considerations that I think you'll need to be making when choosing a flooring for your home. I hope you found it helpful. You can find more information on any of the areas I've talked about on our website, and some visual inspiration from some of our ranges on our stand. And also, please feel free to chat to us directly about any projects you have at the moment via the chat on our stand, or through calling us or emailing us at Domus during the week. You can find details on our stand by clicking through the links. Thanks again for your time, and have a good rest of the day.